Marcus Sullivan had been the golden boy of Riverside High School. Quarterback, homecoming king, 4.0 GPA, early acceptance to Stanford on a full scholarship. Everyone said he was destined for greatness. That was before Principal Victoria Hartwell destroyed his life. It happened during Marcus's senior year, 3 months before graduation. He'd been called to Principal Hartwell's office on a Tuesday afternoon, confused because he'd never been in trouble before. When he arrived, 2 police officers were waiting. They'd found test answers in his locker, not just any test. The SAT, which Marcus had scored a perfect 1,600 on 2 months earlier. Someone had reported an anonymous tip that Marcus had cheated, and when they searched his locker, they found printed copies of the test questions and answers dated the day before he'd taken the exam. "This is in vain," Marcus had said, his voice shaking. "I didn't cheat. I would never—" "The evidence is clear," Principal Hartwell had interrupted, her face stern and unforgiving. "We take academic integrity very seriously at Riverside High. Your scholarship to Stanford will be revoked. You'll be expelled. And depending on the investigation, you may face criminal charges for theft of intellectual property." Marcus's mother had been called. His father had rushed from work. They'd hired a lawyer, demanded a proper investigation, insisted their son was innocent. But Principal Hartwell was immovable. The evidence was damning. The anonymous tip had come from a reliable source. Marcus Sullivan was a cheater, and he would face the consequences. Stanford rescinded the scholarship. Marcus was expelled 3 months before graduation. The story made local news. Golden Boy exposed as fraud. His friends stopped calling. His girlfriend broke up with him. The college dreams he'd worked toward for 4 years evaporated overnight. The worst part was that Marcus was innocent. He'd never seen those test answers before. Someone had planted them in his locker. But he couldn't prove it. And in the court of public opinion, he'd already been convicted. Marcus finished high school at an alternative program for expelled students. He graduated, but without the ceremony, without the celebration, without any of the opportunities he'd earned. He enrolled at the local community college instead of Stanford, worked 2 jobs to pay tuition, watched his former classmates go off to prestigious universities while he stayed behind, branded as a cheater, his reputation destroyed. For 10 years, Marcus lived with that injustice. He earned his associate's degree, then his bachelor's, then his MBA, all while working full-time, all while carrying the weight of what had been stolen from him. He succeeded despite everything, driven by a burning need to prove he was worth more than the label Principal Hartwell had given him. But success didn't erase the anger. It didn't heal the wound. Every achievement felt hollow because it came with an asterisk. He would have gone to Stanford if he hadn't cheated. Marcus thought about revenge constantly, fantasized about exposing Principal Hartwell, about proving his innocence, about making her pay for what she'd done. But he had no proof. The anonymous tip had never been traced. The test answers had been destroyed as evidence. And Principal Hartwell had retired 5 years ago with full honors, celebrated as an educator who'd served the community for 30 years. There was no justice, no vindication, just Marcus, now 32 years old, carrying the anger and pain of an injustice that no one else remembered or cared about. That all changed on a Wednesday morning when Marcus received an unexpected email. The sender was anonymous, the subject line cryptic. "The truth about your expulsion." Marcus almost deleted it as spam, but something made him open it. The email contained a single line. "Principal Hartwell destroyed your life to cover up her son's cheating. I can prove it if you want justice. Meet me at the Riverside Cafe tomorrow at noon. Come alone." Marcus's hands shook as he read the message 3 times. Principal Hartwell had a son? He'd never known that, but the email claimed her son had been involved in his expulsion somehow, that Marcus had been framed to protect someone else. It could be a hoax, a cruel prank, or worse, a trap. But Marcus had spent 10 years wanting answers, wanting proof, wanting justice. The next day at noon, he walked into the Riverside Cafe, his heart pounding, and his life changed forever. The woman sitting at the back corner table was in her early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and tired eyes behind glasses. She looked vaguely familiar, but Marcus couldn't place her. "Marcus Sullivan?" she asked as he approached. "That's me. And you are?" "Daniela Torres. We went to Riverside High together. I was 2 years behind you." She gestured to the seat across from her. "Please sit." Marcus sat, trying to remember her. Vaguely, he recalled a quiet girl who'd been in the band. "You sent the email?" "I did. I've been trying to decide whether to contact you for 5 years, ever since I learned what really happened. But I was afraid of what it would mean, afraid of the consequences." She took a deep breath. "But I can't stay silent anymore. You deserve to know the truth." "The email said Principal Hartwell's son was involved?" Daniela nodded. "Ethan Hartwell, he was in your class, sat behind you in AP Calculus." Marcus remembered him vaguely. A quiet kid, unremarkable, not part of Marcus's social circle. "What about him?" "Ethan was the one who cheated on the SAT, Daniela said. He paid someone to take the test for him, but the proctor got suspicious. Noticed that the person taking the test looked different from Ethan's ID photo. They launched an investigation." Marcus felt his stomach drop, and Principal Hartwell panicked. If Ethan was caught cheating, it would destroy his college prospects, destroy her reputation as an educator. Her own son, a cheater? She'd be humiliated. So she made a decision. Daniela's voice hardened. She decided to frame someone else, someone who'd already taken the SAT and scored high enough to make cheating plausible. Someone whose perfect reputation would make the fall even more dramatic. "Me," Marcus whispered. "You." She planted the test answers in your locker. She made the anonymous tip herself. She orchestrated the entire thing to deflect the investigation away from Ethan. Daniela pulled out a folder. "And I can prove it." She spread documents across the table. Printed emails, handwritten notes, bank statements. 5 years ago, I was working as an administrative assistant in the school district office. I was digitizing old files when I found these. They'd been misfiled, buried in archived records. No one was supposed to see them. Marcus stared at the documents. There was an email from Victoria Hartwell to the SAT testing center claiming she had evidence of cheating by a student named Marcus Sullivan. There were notes in her handwriting detailing a plan to redirect the investigation. There was a bank statement showing a payment to a private investigator, dated 2 days before Marcus's locker was searched. She planned everything, Daniela said quietly. The tip, the search, the evidence. She destroyed your life to save her son's future. Marcus felt like he couldn't breathe. 10 years. 10 years of carrying the weight of something he didn't do, while the person responsible had not only escaped consequences, but had been celebrated as a pillar of the community. Why didn't you come forward sooner? Marcus asked, his voice rough with emotion. Because I was afraid, Daniela admitted. The Hartwells are powerful. Victoria has connections in the school district, in local government. Her husband is a lawyer. I was just a 23-year-old assistant worried about losing my job, about being sued, about making an enemy of people who could destroy my career. She looked down at her hands. I made copies of everything and kept them hidden. Told myself I'd come forward eventually, but years passed and I was a coward. What changed? Daniela's jaw tightened. 3 months ago it happened again. A student at Riverside High was expelled for cheating. A girl named Aaliyah Johnson, bright, talented, from a poor family, finally had a chance at a good college. Principal Hart, Victoria Hartwell's successor, expelled her based on anonymous evidence. The girl swears she's innocent. And when I heard about it, I started wondering, what if the Hartwells did it again? What if they've been doing this for years, destroying kids' lives to protect themselves or their allies? Marcus felt rage building in his chest. You think this is a pattern? I don't know. But I know what they did to you was evil. And I know that if I stay silent, I'm complicit. Daniela pushed the folder toward Marcus. This is yours now, everything I found. It's enough to prove you were framed, enough to destroy Victoria Hartwell's reputation, enough to get justice. Marcus looked at the folder. His hands were shaking. This was what he'd wanted for 10 years, proof, vindication, the ability to clear his name and destroy the person who'd destroyed him. But something Daniela said nagged at him. You mentioned Aaliyah Johnson, the girl who was recently expelled. Is she getting the same treatment I got? The worse, Daniela said. She's black, from the poor side of town. No one's advocating for her, no resources for lawyers. She's being treated as guilty without any real investigation, just like you were. Her life is being destroyed, and no one with power seems to care. Marcus thought about his own expulsion, how isolating it had been, how hopeless. He'd had parents who fought for him, resources to hire a lawyer, a support system. It hadn't been enough to save him, but at least he'd had it. What did Aaliyah have? I want to meet her, Marcus said suddenly. Daniela looked surprised. Aaliyah? Why? Because if the same thing happened to her that happened to me, she deserves justice too. And if we're going to expose what the Hartwells did, we should do it right. Not just for revenge, for real justice. Daniela studied him for a long moment. Then she smiled. the first genuine smile Marcus had seen from her. "You're a better person than I gave you credit for. I thought you'd want to go after Victoria Hartwell immediately." "I do want that," Marcus admitted. "But I've spent 10 years being angry, and I've learned that revenge without purpose is just more pain. If we're going to do this, let's do it in a way that actually fixes the problem, not just punishes the guilty." Daniela pulled out her phone. "Aaliyah works part-time at a bookstore downtown. I can introduce you." As they left the cafe, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in 10 years. Hope. Not just for his own vindication, but for something bigger. Something that mattered. Justice wasn't just about getting even. It was about making sure the same injustice didn't happen again. And Marcus was about to learn that the sweetest revenge was the kind that healed more people than it hurt. The bookstore was small and cluttered, the kind of independent shop that smelled like old paper and coffee. Aaliyah Johnson was working the register when Marcus and Daniela walked in. She was 17 with natural hair pulled back in a head wrap and an expression that tried to be tough but couldn't quite hide the exhaustion underneath. "Aaliyah," Daniela said gently, "this is Marcus Sullivan. He wanted to meet you." Aaliyah's eyes narrowed. "Why?" "Because," Marcus said, "the same thing that happened to you happened to me 10 years ago, and I think I can help." Aaliyah looked skeptical, but she agreed to talk during her break. They sat at a small table in the bookstore's cafe area, and Aaliyah told her story. It was painfully familiar. She'd been accused of plagiarizing an essay for her AP English class. An anonymous tip claimed she'd purchased the essay online. When they searched her laptop, they found a document with the same essay and a timestamp, suggesting she'd downloaded it before the assignment was due. "But I wrote that essay," Aaliyah insisted, her voice passionate. "Every word. I worked on it for 2 weeks. The document on my laptop was my own work, my own words. Someone must have copied it and backdated it to make it look like I downloaded it first." "Did you try to prove that?" Marcus asked. "How?" Aaliyah's laugh was bitter. "I don't have money for a fancy computer forensics expert. My mom works 2 jobs just to keep us in our apartment. We couldn't even afford a lawyer. The school said the evidence was clear. Principal Hart said I was expelled. End of story." "No investigation, no hearing?" "There was a hearing, but it was just a formality. They'd already decided I was guilty." Aaliyah's eyes filled with tears. She quickly blinked away. "I had a scholarship to Howard University. Full ride. It was my dream, my way out. And now it's gone. Howard rescinded the scholarship when I was expelled. I'm working here trying to save money for community college, but it'll take years. And everyone at school thinks I'm a cheater. My friends stopped talking to me. My teachers look at me like I'm trash. My whole future just ended." Marcus felt his anger crystallizing into determination. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about a pattern of abuse. A system that destroyed young people's lives without accountability. "Aaliyah," he said carefully, "what if I told you that I have evidence that proves something similar happened to me 10 years ago? That a school administrator framed me to protect someone else?" Aaliyah looked up sharply. "What kind of evidence?" Marcus glanced at Daniela, who nodded. He pulled out his phone and showed Aaliyah photos of the documents Daniela had given him. The emails, the notes, the proof that Victoria Hartwell had orchestrated his expulsion. Aaliyah read in silence, her expression shifting from skepticism to shock to anger. She framed you. Just made it all up. Destroyed your life because she could. Yes. And I think someone did the same thing to you. Who? I don't know yet, but the fact that it's happening again in the same school district using the same playbook, that's not coincidence. Marcus leaned forward. Daniela and I are going to expose what happened to me. But I want to investigate what happened to you too. If we can prove you were framed the same way I was, we can clear both our names and prevent this from happening to anyone else. Aaliyah looked between Marcus and Daniela, hope and fear warring on her face. Why would you help me? You don't even know me. Because 10 years ago, I needed help and didn't get it, Marcus said simply. Because what happened to you is wrong, and wrong things should be made right. And because revenge is better when it's justice. Aaliyah was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, What do you need from me? Everything you remember, every detail about the accusation, the investigation, who had access to your laptop, who might have had a motive to frame you, and permission to look into your case the same way we're looking into mine. You have it, Aaliyah said immediately. Anything you need. If there's any chance to clear my name, to get my scholarship back, to fix this, her voice broke. I'll do anything. Over the next hour, Aaliyah recounted every detail she could remember. The timeline of events, the people involved, the specifics of the accusation. One detail caught Marcus's attention. You said the essay was for Mr. Patterson's AP English class? Yeah, he was actually really supportive. Said he believed me, that he'd known me for 2 years and knew I wasn't a cheater. But Principal Hart overruled him. Said the evidence was too strong to ignore. Marcus exchanged glances with Daniela. And Principal Hart. What's her connection to the Hartwell family? She's Victoria Hartwell's niece, Daniela said quietly. I should have mentioned that. Catherine Hart. She got the principal position 3 years ago, partly because of Victoria's recommendation. So it's not just the same playbook, Marcus said. It's the same family. The pattern was becoming clear. The Hartwells had protected their own 10 years ago. And now Catherine Hart was doing something similar. But to protect whom? Aaliyah, Marcus asked, was anyone else in your AP English class accused of anything? Any other scandals or investigations around the same time? Aaliyah thought for a moment. Not accused exactly, but there was something weird. Mason Hart, Principal Hart's son, he's in my class. He won some big essay contest right around the same time I was expelled. A national competition. The prize was a full scholarship to any college. Marcus felt pieces clicking together. What was the contest about? It was for an essay on social justice. Mason submitted something about educational equity. Aaliyah's expression turned bitter. Ironic, right? He wrote about fairness in education while his mom was destroying my future. Did you see his essay? Daniela asked. No, but apparently it was brilliant. The judges said it was one of the best they'd ever read. Marcus had a theory forming, but he'd need more evidence. Aaliyah, do you still have a copy of your essay? The one you were accused of plagiarizing? Yeah, it's in my email. I sent it to myself before submitting it. Why? Because I want to compare it to Mason Hart's award-winning essay, and if I'm right about what happened, we're about to expose something much bigger than just what happened to you and me. Marcus threw himself into the investigation with the focus and determination that had gotten him through 10 years of rebuilding his life. He'd learned something important in those years. Success wasn't about being the smartest or the most talented. It was about being thorough, persistent, and willing to do the unglamorous work that others avoided. He created a timeline, documented everything, cross-referenced dates and events, and he reached out to someone he'd hoped never to contact, his former lawyer, Richard Chen. Richard had been the attorney Marcus's parents hired to defend him 10 years ago. They'd lost the case, but Richard had always believed in Marcus's innocence. When Marcus called and explained what he'd discovered, Richard agreed to meet immediately. "I knew something was wrong about your case," Richard said, as they sat in his office reviewing the documents Daniela had provided. "The evidence was too convenient, too perfect. But I couldn't prove it, and Victoria Hartwell stonewalled every attempt to investigate further. She had the school board's full support." "Can we use this evidence now?" Marcus asked. "To clear my name and go after her?" Richard studied the documents carefully. "This is damning. These emails alone prove Victoria Hartwell orchestrated your expulsion to protect her son. Combined with your testimony and Daniela's, we could probably get your expulsion overturned and pursue a civil suit for damages." He looked up. "But it's been 10 years. Statute of limitations might be an issue for some claims, and Victoria is retired now. There was limited accountability we can impose." "What about Aaliyah's case?" Daniela interjected. "That's current. If we can prove the same pattern, that would be different," Richard interrupted, his eyes lighting up. "If we can demonstrate a pattern of abuse spanning years involving multiple members of the same family, that's conspiracy, that's fraud. That could bring down not just Victoria Hartwell, but anyone who enabled this behavior." Marcus pulled out his laptop. "Then let me show you what we've found." He'd spent 3 days investigating Aaliyah's case with the same thoroughness he'd applied to his own vindication. He'd obtained copies of her essay through her email. He'd found Mason Hart's award-winning essay on the competition website. And he'd done something that modern technology made possible: run both essays through plagiarism detection software. The results were stunning. Aaliyah's essay and Mason's essay were nearly identical, not in subject matter. Mason's was about educational equity, while Aaliyah's was about resilience in the face of adversity. But in writing style, sentence structure, vocabulary patterns, even the rhythm of the prose. According to the sophisticated analysis software Marcus had used, there was a 94% probability that both essays were written by the same person. Mason didn't write his award-winning essay, Marcus said. Aaliyah did, or rather, someone stole Aaliyah's writing style and created an essay that would win competitions. Then they framed Aaliyah as a plagiarist to discredit her in case anyone noticed the similarities. Richard leaned back in his chair, processing this. "That's incredibly malicious. And if we can prove it, we can," Daniela said. She pulled out another folder. "I've been doing my own digging. Mason Hart's academic record shows a pattern. His writing assignments freshman and sophomore year were mediocre B's and C's. But suddenly, junior year, his writing improved dramatically. All A's. Teachers commenting on his mature voice and sophisticated analysis. The timing matches when Aaliyah transferred to Riverside High. Marcus added, and I found something else. Mason applied to the same scholarship program at Howard University that Aaliyah had won. He was rejected. The rejection letter specifically mentioned that his application essay, while competent, lacked the authentic voice and lived experience that made Aaliyah's application stand out. So he was jealous, Richard said slowly. Or his mother was. Principal Hart saw that a scholarship her son wanted had gone to another student, a student whose writing was demonstrably better, and she decided to eliminate the competition and steal Aaliyah's writing style to boost Mason's prospects. It's not just revenge, Marcus said. It's theft, identity theft in a way. They stole Aaliyah's voice, her work, her future, and they destroyed her reputation so she couldn't fight back. Richard was quiet for a long moment, reading through the evidence. Finally, he said, "This is one of the most elaborate academic fraud schemes I've ever seen, and if we're right, if we can prove this, the consequences will be enormous. Mason's scholarship will be revoked. Principal Hart will be fired and likely face criminal charges, and Aaliyah will be vindicated." "What about Victoria Hartwell?" Marcus asked. "What about justice for what she did to me?" "Once we expose the pattern, your case becomes part of the evidence," Richard explained. "We show that this family has been doing this for at least a decade, that Victoria pioneered the tactic and Catherine continued it. The school district will be forced to investigate every expulsion, every scandal, every accusation from the past 10 years. If there are other victims, they'll be found. And Victoria Hartwell's legacy will be destroyed." Marcus thought about that. Destroying Victoria's legacy. It was what he'd wanted for 10 years. The revenge he'd fantasized about. But now that it was within reach, he realized it wasn't enough. "I don't just want to destroy her legacy," Marcus said. "I want to build something better. If we expose this, the school district will need reforms, new policies, protections for students accused of misconduct, real investigations instead of railroad jobs. I want to make sure this never happens to anyone else." Richard smiled. "That's called restorative justice. You're not just punishing the wrongdoers. You're fixing the system that allowed them to cause harm in the first place." "That's what I want," Marcus confirmed. "Can we do that?" "We can try," Richard said. "But it won't be easy. The Hartwells will fight back. They have resources, connections, and a lot to lose. Are you prepared for that?" Marcus thought about Aaliyah, working in a bookstore instead of attending Howard University, about all the dreams she'd had to defer because of someone else's cruelty and greed. "I'm prepared," Marcus said. "Let's do this." Richard's strategy was methodical. Before going to the school district or the media, he wanted to build an airtight case. That meant gathering more evidence, interviewing witnesses, and preparing for every possible counter-argument the Hartwells might raise. Marcus became the lead investigator, working nights and weekends while maintaining his day job. He'd become a data analyst for a tech company, a career that used the same skills he was now applying to unraveling the Hartwell's fraud. He tracked down former Riverside High students who might have witnessed suspicious activity. He reviewed old yearbooks and school records. He built spreadsheets and timelines and evidence maps. Aaliyah helped where she could, though Marcus insisted she focus on her own healing and future. But she wanted to be involved. "This is my life," she said. "I deserve to fight for it." Daniela, meanwhile, did something risky. She went back to the school district archives and looked for other cases that matched the pattern: anonymous accusations, convenient evidence, students expelled or punished without thorough investigation. She found 3 more cases over the past 10 years. Not as dramatic as Marcus's or Aaliyah's, but troubling nonetheless. Students who'd been suspended or had scholarships revoked based on questionable evidence. Students who'd maintained their innocence but were never believed. Daniela contacted each of them. 2 refused to talk, still traumatized by what had happened. But one, a woman named Jennifer Park, who'd been suspended for alleged cyberbullying 7 years ago, agreed to share her story. "I was accused of posting mean comments about another girl online," Jennifer told them. "But the IP address they traced the comments to was from my home computer. The problem was I was out of town that weekend visiting my grandmother. I had receipts, photos, witnesses proving I wasn't even in the state. But Principal Hartwell said the evidence was clear. I was suspended for 2 weeks, kicked off the student council, and lost my appointment to a youth advisory board I'd been selected for." "Do you remember who made the accusation?" Marcus asked. Jennifer nodded bitterly. "The other girl's name was Amanda Hartwell, Victoria's niece, Catherine Hart's daughter." Another Hartwell, another case of the family protecting their own and destroying anyone who got in their way. By the time Richard declared they had enough evidence, Marcus had documented a pattern spanning 10 years and 5 victims. The Hartwell family had used their positions of power to frame, discredit, or destroy anyone who posed a threat to their children's success. "It's time," Richard said at a meeting in early November. "We're ready to go public." The strategy was carefully orchestrated. First, Richard would file formal complaints with the school district on behalf of Marcus, Aaliyah, and Jennifer. Those complaints would include all the evidence they'd gathered and demand immediate investigations. Simultaneously, they would hold a press conference. Marcus, Aaliyah, and Jennifer would tell their stories publicly. The media couldn't ignore 3 victims spanning 10 years, all with documented evidence of fraud and corruption. And finally, Richard would file civil suits on behalf of each victim, seeking damages and demanding systematic reforms to prevent future abuse. The night before the press conference, Marcus couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the moment he'd learned he was being expelled, how his entire world had collapsed in an instant, how he'd felt helpless and voiceless and utterly alone. Tomorrow, he would have his voice back, and he'd use it to make sure no other kid felt as helpless as he once had. At 10 a.m. the next morning, Marcus stood before a room full of reporters, cameras, and concerned citizens. Aaliyah stood on one side of him, Jennifer on the other. Richard stood at the podium, ready to present their case. "Thank you for coming," Richard began. "Today we're exposing a pattern of abuse, fraud, and corruption that has devastated young lives for over a decade. Members of the Hartwell family, using their positions of authority within Riverside High School and the broader school district, have systematically framed students for academic misconduct to protect their own family members from consequences and to eliminate competition for academic opportunities. He laid out the evidence: Marcus's case, Aaliyah's case, Jennifer's case, the pattern that connected them all, the documentation proving that Victoria Hartwell and later Catherine Hart had orchestrated these injustices. Then Marcus spoke. "I was 17 years old when Principal Victoria Hartwell destroyed my future to protect her son," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion. "I lost my scholarship to Stanford. I lost my reputation. I lost years of my life to anger and pain. But I survived. I rebuilt. And now I'm standing here not just for myself, but for Aaliyah Johnson, whose dreams were stolen this year, for Jennifer Park, whose reputation was damaged 7 years ago, and for any other student who's been victimized by this corrupt system." Aaliyah spoke next, her voice strong. "I wrote an essay about resilience, about overcoming obstacles and refusing to be broken by circumstances beyond my control. And then someone stole that essay, framed me as a plagiarist, and took away my scholarship to Howard University. But just like I wrote in that essay, I'm still here, I'm still fighting, and I'm going to win." The questions from reporters came fast. How had they gathered the evidence? What did they want from the school district? What about the Hartwells? Richard fielded most of the questions, but Marcus answered one himself. "What do you want from Victoria Hartwell?" a reporter asked. "Are you seeking revenge?" Marcus thought carefully before responding. "I want accountability. I want her to admit what she did and face consequences. But more than that, I want reform. I want the school district to implement real protections for students accused of misconduct. I want thorough investigations instead of rush to judgment. I want a system where powerful people can't destroy young lives to protect their own interests. That's not revenge. That's justice." The press conference made national news. By evening, the story was everywhere. Decade-long pattern of corruption at Riverside High. Students fight back against academic fraud. The Hartwell scandal, how one family abused power to destroy lives. The school district announced an immediate investigation. Catherine Hart was placed on administrative leave. Victoria Hartwell, though retired, issued a statement through her lawyer denying all allegations. And Marcus, Aaliyah, and Jennifer waited to see if their fight for justice would succeed. The investigation moved faster than Marcus expected. Once the story broke, more victims came forward. A student who'd been accused of cheating 6 years ago. Another who'd been falsely accused of theft. Parents who'd suspected corruption but had been too intimidated to speak up. The pattern was undeniable. The Hartwell family had abused their power for years. Within 2 weeks, the school district's investigation confirmed what Marcus had documented. Catherine Hart was fired immediately. Criminal charges were filed for fraud, conspiracy, and abuse of authority. The district attorney announced that Victoria Hartwell would also face charges for her role in Marcus's expulsion and potentially others. Mason Hart's scholarship was revoked. The essay he'd submitted, Aaliyah's work, stolen and repurposed, was exposed as fraud. His acceptance to every university that had admitted him based on that essay was rescinded. But the sweetest moment came when Marcus received a call from Stanford University. "Mr. Sullivan," the admissions officer said, "we've reviewed your original application and the recent revelations about your expulsion. We've determined that your admission was wrongfully revoked based on fabricated evidence. Stanford would like to formally reinstate your acceptance and offer you a full scholarship to complete your undergraduate degree should you wish to accept." Marcus sat in stunned silence. "I'm 32 years old. I already have my bachelor's degree." "We understand, but if you'd like to pursue any additional education, a graduate degree perhaps, Stanford wants to make this right. The scholarship would cover a master's program or MBA in any field you choose. It's the least we can do to acknowledge the injustice you suffered." Marcus thought about it. A master's from Stanford. The dream he'd been denied, finally within reach. But he'd built a good life despite everything. He had a career he enjoyed, a community he'd become part of through this process, a purpose he'd discovered in fighting for justice. "Thank you," Marcus said, "but I think the scholarship should go to Aaliyah Johnson. She's the one whose future is just beginning. She deserves the opportunities that were stolen from her." There was a pause. Then the admissions officer said, "We've actually already reached out to Ms. Johnson separately. Howard University reinstated her scholarship and she's enrolled there now, but she mentioned you in her statement to them, said you were the reason she got her life back." Marcus felt tears sting his eyes. She got her scholarship back? She did, and more than that, Howard created a fund in her name to support other students who've been wrongly accused of academic misconduct. Your case and hers have sparked a national conversation about due process protections for students. Multiple universities are implementing new policies. The impact of what you've done extends far beyond just your own vindication. After hanging up, Marcus sat in his apartment processing everything. Aaliyah was going to Howard. Jennifer Park had received a formal apology from the school district and a settlement that would cover her law school tuition. The other victims had been vindicated. And Victoria Hartwell, the woman who'd haunted Marcus's nightmares for 10 years, was facing criminal charges and public disgrace. It was everything he'd wanted. Justice, vindication, revenge. So why did it feel incomplete? Marcus thought about the conversation at the press conference. When the reporter asked what he wanted, he'd said, accountability and reform. But there was something else he wanted, something harder to articulate. He wanted healing, not just for himself, but for everyone involved. That evening, Marcus did something unexpected. He wrote a letter to Victoria Hartwell. "Ms. Hartwell," he began, "you destroyed my life to protect your son. You framed me, expelled me, and took away my future because you thought it was worth it to preserve your family's reputation. For 10 years, I hated you. I fantasized about revenge, about making you pay for what you did to me. Now I have that revenge. You're facing criminal charges. Your reputation is ruined. The family legacy you tried to protect is destroyed. Everything you did to me is being done to you 1,000 times over by public opinion and the justice system. But I'm writing to tell you something. I don't hate you anymore. I'm angry about what you did. I believe you should face consequences, but I don't hate you. Because hate is exhausting and I'm tired of carrying it. What you did was wrong, evil even, but you're still a human being. You made terrible choices to protect someone you loved. You convinced yourself those choices were justified. And you probably never imagined the full impact of what you were doing to the lives you destroyed. I hope you face justice. I hope the legal system holds you accountable. But I also hope you find a way to make amends. Not to me, I don't need your apology. But to yourself. To the person you used to be before you decided that protecting your family was worth destroying other families. This letter isn't forgiveness. I'm not ready for that, and you haven't earned it. But it's a release. I'm letting go of the hate that's been poisoning me for a decade. I'm choosing to move forward without you in my head. The sweetest revenge isn't destroying you. It's living well despite what you did. It's using my experience to help others. It's building something better from the rubble you created. I'm done with revenge. Now I'm focused on justice and healing and making sure no other kid goes through what I went through. That's my final statement to you. I hope you find peace, and I hope you never hurt anyone again. Marcus mailed the letter, not sure if Victoria would even read it. But writing it had helped him. He was done being defined by what had been done to him. Now he was going to be defined by what he chose to do next. 6 months after the press conference, Marcus stood in the auditorium at Riverside High School for a very different kind of public event. The school district had invited him, Aaliyah, Jennifer, and the other victims to participate in the unveiling of new student protections and due process policies. These reforms had been shaped by input from everyone affected by the Hartwell scandal. Students accused of misconduct would now have the right to representation, access to evidence, and impartial hearings. Anonymous accusations would no longer be sufficient for discipline. Investigations would be conducted by third-party professionals, not school administrators, with potential conflicts of interest. And every case would be reviewed by a student-parent advisory committee to ensure fairness. But more than that, the school had created the Marcus Sullivan and Aaliyah Johnson Scholarship Fund, a program that would provide financial support to students who'd overcome adversity to pursue education. It would be funded by donations and by a settlement from the lawsuit against Victoria Hartwell and Catherine Hart. This feels surreal, Aaliyah whispered to Marcus as they waited to speak. She'd come back from Howard for the event, radiant in her college sweatshirt, clearly thriving in the environment she'd been denied for months. Good surreal or bad surreal? Marcus asked. Good. Definitely good. 6 months ago, I was working at a bookstore with no future. Now I'm at Howard on the pre-law track, and there's a scholarship fund with my name on it. It's like a dream. You earned it, Marcus said. You fought for yourself. You didn't give up. Neither did you, for 10 years. Aaliyah looked at him seriously. Thank you for believing me, for fighting for me, for showing me that justice is possible even when it seems impossible. When it was Marcus's turn to speak, he looked out at the audience. Students, teachers, parents, community members. He saw Mrs. Chen, his former lawyer's mother, who'd helped investigate the case. He saw Daniela Torres, the whistleblower who'd made everything possible. He saw Jennifer Park, now in law school, and determined to advocate for others. And in the back, he saw his parents, who'd never stopped believing in him. 10 years ago, Marcus began, I stood in Principal Hartwell's office and watched my future disappear. Everything I'd worked for was taken away based on lies. I was angry, bitter, consumed by the injustice of it all. And for a long time, all I wanted was revenge. I wanted to hurt the people who'd hurt me. I wanted them to suffer the way I'd suffered. But over the past 6 months, I've learned something important. Revenge is hollow. It might feel good in the moment, but it doesn't heal anything. It doesn't fix the problem. It just perpetuates the cycle of harm. Justice is different. Justice acknowledges the wrong, holds people accountable, and tries to prevent future harm. Justice isn't about punishment for its own sake. It's about restoration, making things right, creating a better system so others don't suffer what we suffered. The reforms being implemented today are justice. The scholarship fund is justice. The students who'll benefit from these protections, students we'll never meet, whose names we'll never know, they're the real victory, because they won't have to go through what we went through. Victoria Hartwell and Catherine Hart face legal consequences for their actions. That's appropriate and necessary. But the real triumph isn't their downfall. It's what we built from the rubble. It's the fact that we turned our pain into purpose, our anger into advocacy, our desire for revenge into a commitment to justice. I'm standing here today not as a victim, but as someone who survived, who fought back, who refused to let injustice have the last word. And to every student in this room who's facing adversity, who's been treated unfairly, who feels like the system is stacked against them, I want you to know you're not alone. You have power. And if you fight for what's right, if you refuse to accept injustice, if you build alliances and tell your truth, you can win. Not because revenge is sweet, but because justice is possible. The applause was thunderous. Marcus stepped back, feeling lighter than he had in years. The weight he'd carried, the anger, the bitterness, the obsession with revenge, was finally gone. After the ceremony, Marcus was approached by a teenage boy who looked nervous. "Mr. Sullivan, I'm Ethan Hartwell." Marcus froze. Victoria Hartwell's son. The person she'd framed Marcus to protect. The person whose future had been prioritized over Marcus's. Ethan was now 28, no longer the quiet teenager Marcus vaguely remembered. He looked tired, sad, and deeply ashamed. "I don't expect you to talk to me," Ethan said quickly. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, I didn't know. My mother never told me what she did. I found out from the news like everyone else, and His voice broke. "I've been living with your stolen future for 10 years. Every success I had was built on your destroyed dreams. I can't ever make that right. But I needed you to know that I'm sorry, and that I've been working with the prosecutors to testify about my mother's behavior. It's the least I can do." Marcus looked at this man, this person who'd benefited from his suffering, but who hadn't asked for it, who'd been a kid when his mother made those choices, who was now trying in his own way to make amends. "Did you cheat on the SAT?" Marcus asked. Ethan nodded miserably. "Yes, I was stupid and desperate and terrified of disappointing my parents. It was the biggest mistake of my life, not just because of what my mother did to you, but because I've spent 10 years feeling like a fraud. Like I didn't earn anything I achieved. I came clean during the investigation, confessed everything. My degrees have been revoked. My career is over. But honestly, it's a relief. I've been living a lie for so long. Now at least the truth is out. Marcus saw the genuine remorse in Ethan's eyes, the weight of guilt he'd been carrying, and he made a decision. I appreciate you saying that, Marcus said. And I appreciate your testimony. That takes courage, but Ethan, you were 17, you made a bad choice. You didn't destroy my life. Your mother did. She's the adult who decided that framing an innocent person was acceptable. That's not on you. But I benefited. You did. And that's something you'll have to carry, but you're not responsible for your mother's choices. You're only responsible for your own. Marcus extended his hand. You're testifying. You're being honest. You're facing consequences. That's all anyone can ask. Ethan shook his hand, tears in his eyes. Thank you. I don't deserve your understanding. But thank you. After Ethan left, Aaliyah came up beside Marcus. That was generous of you, forgiving him like that. I didn't forgive him, Marcus corrected. I just refused to hold him responsible for something his mother did. There's a difference. He's still dealing with the consequences of his own choices, but he's not his mother. And holding on to hatred for him would only hurt me, not help anyone. The sweetest revenge really is living well, isn't it? Aaliyah said thoughtfully. Marcus smiled. Yeah, it really is. 3 years after the scandal broke, Marcus stood in front of a new building bearing a sign. The Justice Project, Advocacy Center for Student Rights. The nonprofit organization had been his idea, funded initially by his settlement from the lawsuit, and now supported by donations from across the country. The Justice Project provided free legal assistance to students accused of academic or disciplinary misconduct, ensuring they had representation in fair hearings. It also advocated for policy reforms at schools and universities nationwide. Aaliyah Johnson was the organization's first intern, working there during her summers while pursuing her law degree at Howard. She'd become a passionate advocate for due process rights, and her story had inspired countless students facing similar injustices. Jennifer Park had joined the board of directors after graduating from law school, bringing her expertise in education law and her personal understanding of what students faced when wrongly accused. And Daniela Torres had left her administrative job to become the organization's full-time investigator, using her skills to uncover patterns of abuse and corruption at schools across the country. Together, they'd helped exonerate 43 students in 3 years. 43 young people who might have had their lives destroyed by false accusations, but who instead got justice because someone believed them and fought for them. Victoria Hartwell had been convicted of conspiracy and fraud, sentenced to 3 years in prison, and ordered to pay restitution to all her victims. Catherine Hart received a similar sentence. Both women's reputations were permanently destroyed. But the Justice Project wasn't about revenge. It was about prevention, about making sure the next Marcus, the next Aaliyah, the next Jennifer had someone in their corner. On the day of the center's grand opening, Marcus gave a speech to the assembled crowd of students, parents, educators, and donors. 3 years ago, he said, I had a choice. I could use the evidence of my wrongful expulsion to destroy the people who'd hurt me, get revenge, make them pay, or I could use that evidence to build something better, something that would help others. I chose justice over revenge, and it was the best decision I ever made. Revenge is satisfying for a moment, but justice lasts. Justice creates change. Justice prevents future harm. Justice heals communities instead of just punishing individuals. This center represents that choice. Every student we help, every policy we reform, every false accusation we expose, that's not revenge. That's justice, and it's the sweetest victory I could imagine. Because in the end, the best revenge isn't tearing others down, it's building others up. It's taking your pain and transforming it into purpose. It's refusing to let injustice win. 10 years ago, someone tried to destroy my life. Instead, they inadvertently gave me a mission. And now every time we help a student who's been wrongly accused, every time we prevent another family from suffering what mine suffered, I win again. And I'll keep winning, because that's what justice looks like. Welcome to the Justice Project. This is where revenge becomes redemption, where anger becomes advocacy, where victims become victors. This is where we change the world, one student at a time. As the crowd applauded and the center officially opened its doors, Marcus looked around at the people who joined him on this journey. Aaliyah, whose resilience had inspired him, Daniela, whose courage had made everything possible, Jennifer, whose determination had shown that healing was achievable, his parents, who'd never stopped believing, his lawyer Richard, who'd fought for justice even when it seemed impossible. This was his revenge, not destruction, but creation, not hatred, but hope, not tearing down, but building up. The sweetest revenge was living well, and helping others live well too. Marcus had spent 10 years angry. Now he'd spend the rest of his life making sure that anger created something beautiful, something lasting, something that made the world just a little bit better. Because that's what real justice looked like. And it was sweeter than revenge ever could be.